The lawyer's office felt smaller than it should have. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs that creaked with every shift, an air so thick with tension I could barely breathe. I sat across from my brother Marcus, watching him pretend to grieve. His suit was expensive, tailored perfectly, probably bought with money he'd already started spending in his mind. Attorney Harold Burke cleared his throat and began reading our father's will. Each word felt like a hammer blow. To my son Marcus Harrison, I leave the family home at 847 Oakwood Drive, the construction company Harrison & Sons, all investment portfolios, savings accounts, and remaining property holdings. My heart stopped. The room spun slightly as I gripped the armrest. And to my daughter Callie Harrison, I leave my mother's pearl necklace, as requested. That was it. 43 years of my father's life, everything he'd built, everything he'd worked for, reduced to a single piece of jewelry. Marcus shifted in his seat, crossing his legs slowly. He brought one hand up to his face, pretending to wipe away a tear that didn't exist. But I caught it. The tiny smirk at the corner of his mouth. The satisfied gleam in his eyes. Something was very, very wrong. I waited until we were outside. The parking lot was nearly empty, late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the asphalt. Marcus walked toward his car, keys jingling in his hand like he didn't have a care in the world. "You changed it," I said, my voice low but sharp enough to stop him mid-stride. He turned slowly, eyebrows raised in mock confusion. "Changed what, Callie?" "Dad's will. You changed it." Marcus tilted his head, studying me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Dad finally saw who you really are. Maybe if you'd spent more time with him instead of chasing your little career, things would be different." The words were designed to hurt, and they did. But I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing it. My hand curled into a fist at my side. Every muscle in my body wanted to slap that smug expression off his face. Instead, I took a deep breath and turned away. "This isn't over," I said quietly. Behind me, I heard him laugh. "Yes, Callie, it is." I walked to my car, jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. Control over chaos, evidence over emotion. I would need both to survive what came next. Back home, I collapsed on my couch, entire body shaking. The apartment felt too quiet, too empty. Dad's reading glasses still sat on my coffee table from his last visit, 3 months ago before everything fell apart. I picked them up with trembling fingers, remembering how he'd forgotten them, how I'd promised to return them next Sunday. There was no next Sunday now. My name is Callie Harrison. I'm 36 years old, a civil engineer who spent the last 15 years building infrastructure projects across the state. And my brother just stole everything our father built while he was still fighting for his life in a hospital bed. The realization crashed over me like ice water. This wasn't about inheritance or fairness or even greed. This was about Marcus erasing me from our father's life, claiming sole ownership of a legacy we were supposed to share. Dad had always said we'd run the company together someday. He'd promised me that when I was 12 years old, standing in the frame of a house he was building. "You and Marcus," he'd said, ruffling my hair, "my 2 most important projects." But Marcus had never wanted to share anything. Not Dad's attention, not the business, and certainly not the money. I should have seen this coming. The signs were there. I just hadn't wanted to believe my own brother could be capable of such betrayal. 2 months earlier, everything had been different. I sat beside Dad's hospital bed, holding his hand while monitors beeped steadily in the background. He looked so small under the white sheets, nothing like the strong man who taught me to swing a hammer when I was 7. "You're the strong one, Cal," he'd whispered, his voice weak but clear. "Always have been. Marcus, he's got ambition but no backbone. You got both." I'd squeezed his hand gently. "Don't talk like that. You're going to be fine." "Promise me something." His grip tightened with surprising strength. "Keep my house safe. The business, everything I built. Don't let anyone destroy it." "I promise, Dad, but you're going to be around to do that yourself." He'd smiled then, that knowing smile that said he understood things I didn't yet. "Just promise me, sweetheart." "I promise." 2 weeks later, he slipped into a coma. The doctors said it was complications from the pneumonia, that his body was just too tired to keep fighting. Marcus had arrived at the hospital that day, dressed in a suit like he'd come from a business meeting. He'd barely looked at Dad before pulling me aside. "I'll handle everything," he'd said. "The business, the legal stuff, all of it. You just focus on being here for Dad." I'd been grateful then. Stupid, trusting, grateful. The email with the will copy arrived 3 days after the reading. I opened it on my laptop, scanning through the legal language until I found what I was looking for. The date jumped out at me like a neon sign. Signed and notarized, October 15th. My hands started shaking. I pulled up my calendar, scrolling back through the weeks. October 15th was 2 weeks after Dad had slipped into the coma. 2 weeks after he'd stopped responding to voices, stopped opening his eyes, stopped being able to communicate in any way. He couldn't have signed anything on October 15th. It was medically impossible. I screenshot the date, saved it 3 different ways, and sat back in my chair. The apartment suddenly felt colder. Marcus hadn't just changed the will. He'd forged it, created an entirely new document, and somehow made it look legitimate. But why would the lawyer accept it? Why wouldn't he question a will signed by someone in a coma? Unless Marcus had an explanation, a story, something that made it seem plausible. I needed to know exactly what had happened in that hospital during those 2 weeks. Every visit, every conversation, every piece of paper Marcus had brought into Dad's room, and I knew exactly who to ask. Lydia, Dad's primary nurse, the woman who'd been there through everything. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and sad coffee. I found Lydia at the nurse's station, reviewing charts. She looked up when I approached, her expression immediately sympathetic. "Callie, honey, I'm so sorry about your father. He was a wonderful man." "Thank you, Lydia. Can I ask you something about his final weeks?" She nodded, gesturing to a quieter corner of the hallway. We moved away from the busy station, and I tried to keep my voice steady. "Did Marcus bring any documents for Dad to sign? Near the middle of October." Lydia's face shifted, something uncertain crossing her features. "Oh, yes, he brought papers a few times. Said they were medical forms, insurance stuff. I didn't think anything of it at the time." My stomach dropped. Medical forms. That's what he told me. Your father couldn't sign them himself, of course, being in the coma. But Marcus said he had power of attorney that he could sign on your father's behalf. I wasn't in the room when it happened. He requested privacy. Privacy? To forge our father's signature on a fraudulent will. Did anyone witness these signings? Any notary? Lydia frowned, thinking. There was a man with him once. Older gentleman, had a briefcase. Could have been a notary, I suppose. But Callie, I'm not supposed to talk about patient records or... It's okay, I interrupted gently. You've helped me more than you know. Dad's study looked exactly as he'd left it. Books lining the walls, blueprints rolled up in the corner, his old desk covered with project files. Marcus hadn't touched this room yet, probably saving it for last, savoring the complete takeover. I tore through drawers, searching for anything that might help. Old tax returns, business contracts, letters from clients. Nothing about the will, nothing about his final wishes. Then I remembered something Dad had said 6 months ago before he got sick. "Callie, there's a fireproof box in the hall closet. I want you to take it home, keep it safe for me, just in case anything happens." "Dad, nothing's going to happen." "Humor an old man, keep it at your place. Don't tell Marcus, it's just between us." I'd thought it was paranoia. Now I realized it was protection. I rushed home, practically running to my bedroom closet. The metal box sat exactly where I'd left it, dusty and forgotten. My hands shook as I found the key Dad had given me, hidden in my jewelry box. The lock clicked open. Inside were photographs, old documents, business records, and one sealed envelope, yellow with age, marked in Dad's handwriting. "For Callie, original will. Do not open unless necessary." My breath caught. I stared at those words until they blurred. He'd known. Somehow, Dad had known to protect this. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a legal document, properly formatted and notarized. The date at the top, September 3rd, 1 month before Dad went into the coma, 1 month before Marcus created his forgery. I read through it twice, barely believing what I was seeing. Everything split evenly between Marcus and me. The house divided into equal shares. The company with both of us listed as co-owners and board members. Dad's investment accounts distributed fairly. And one crucial detail that made my heart skip. Callie Harrison is hereby designated as successor trustee and primary executor of this estate. The signature at the bottom was genuine. I'd seen Dad's handwriting my entire life. This was real. His actual wishes, properly documented and legally binding. The notary seal was clear, embossed into the paper. Witness signatures from two of Dad's oldest friends, both of whom had attended his funeral. This wasn't some draft or preliminary document. This was the real will, properly executed according to state law. I clutched the paper to my chest, tears streaming down my face. "You messed with the wrong sister," I whispered to the empty room. Marcus thought he'd won. He'd celebrated his victory, probably already spent money in his mind, already imagined himself as the sole heir to the Harrison legacy. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated me, and he'd forgotten that Dad was always 3 steps ahead of everyone. 9. Instead of confronting Marcus immediately, I made a phone call. Attorney Thomas Whitman had a reputation as a quiet strategist, someone who won cases through careful preparation rather than courtroom dramatics. His office was modest, unlike Burke's pretentious setup. "Tell me everything," Whitman said, settling into his chair with a yellow legal pad. I laid it all out. The forged will dated during Dad's coma. The real will hidden in the fireproof box. Marcus's visits to the hospital with medical forms. The nurse's testimony about privacy requests. Everything I'd discovered in the past week. Whitman listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When I finished, he looked up with a slight smile. "Ms. Harrison, your brother just committed multiple felonies. Forgery, fraud, possibly even elder abuse given the circumstances. But here's what we're going to do. We don't react publicly. We don't confront him again. We let him get comfortable in his victory. Let him start making moves, transferring assets, spending money. Every action he takes now is another nail in his coffin." "How long?" I asked. "A few weeks, maybe a month. We'll handle this strategically. Sometimes the best revenge is patience." He paused, studying the original will. "Your father was a smart man. He knew to protect this document. That tells me he suspected something might happen. He told me to keep the house safe. I thought he meant from decay or squatters. I didn't realize he meant from Marcus." 2 weeks later, I discovered Marcus had already started moving assets. I logged into the company portal using my old credentials, which Marcus apparently hadn't thought to revoke yet. What I found made my blood boil. Harrison and Sons Construction was being systematically stripped. Company vehicles red-idled in Marcus's name. Business accounts transferred to new banks where only he had signature authority. The main office building, which Dad had owned outright, now had Marcus listed as sole proprietor. Even the equipment, thousands of dollars worth of tools and machinery, had been quietly sold to a third party. I screenshot everything, documenting each fraudulent transfer. Then I called Whitman. "He's moving fast," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. To my surprise, Whitman sounded pleased. "Good, that's traceable fraud. Every transaction leaves a paper trail. Every forged signature on transfer documents is more evidence. Let him keep going, Ms. Harrison. He's building our case for us." "But what if he sells everything before we can stop him?" "He won't have time. We'll file within the week. I just wanted to see how far he'd go. Now we know, your brother isn't just greedy, he's reckless." I hung up feeling slightly better. Marcus's confidence was becoming his weakness. He thought he'd won so completely that he'd stopped being careful. Every move he made now would be used against him. Dad used to say that the biggest mistakes happen right after someone thinks they've already won. Marcus was proving him right. The memorial fundraiser was held at the country club Dad had belonged to for 30 years. The event was Marcus's idea, supposedly to honor Dad's legacy and raise money for the local trade school. In reality, it was a victory lap, a chance for Marcus to play the grieving son while cementing his position as Dad's sole heir. I wore a simple black dress and forced myself to smile as I walked through the crowd. Former business partners, family friends, distant relatives, everyone offering condolences, everyone believing the story Marcus had crafted. He stood at the front of the room, giving a speech about continuing Dad's legacy. His voice was smooth, practiced, dripping with false emotion. My father built this company with his bare hands, started with nothing but a truck and a toolbox. He taught me everything I know about construction, about business, about integrity. The irony of that last word almost made me laugh. And now it's my responsibility, my honor, to carry forward his vision. Harrison and Sons will continue to build this community, just as he would have wanted. The crowd applauded. Marcus's wife, standing beside him, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I stood in the back, hands clenched at my sides, forcing myself to keep smiling. People glanced at me, probably wondering why I wasn't on stage, why I wasn't mentioned in Marcus's grand plans. I caught his eye across the room. For just a moment his mask slipped. He smirked. A tiny, victorious smirk that said he'd won completely. I mouthed 4 words, "I'll destroy you." The phone call came 3 days later, from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Ms. Harrison, this is Theodore Brennan. Or rather I was, your brother's attorney." I straightened in my chair. I'm calling off the record. What I'm about to say violates no attorney-client privilege because I'm no longer representing your brother. I've withdrawn from the case. Why? Brennan sighed heavily. Because something about this entire situation feels wrong. The timing of the will, the way your brother insisted on handling everything privately, the fact that your father was in a coma when the document was supposedly signed. I've been practicing law for 35 years, Ms. Harrison. I know what fraud looks like. My heart pounded. Are you saying? I'm saying the signature on that will doesn't look like your father's other signatures. Not quite. It's close, but there are inconsistencies. Small ones. The kind you'd see in a traced forgery rather than an authentic signature. I brought my concerns to your brother. He became defensive, hostile, told me to process the will as written or he'd find another lawyer. So I found him another lawyer and withdrew. Will you testify to this? If subpoenaed, yes. I won't lie to protect a fraud. Your father was a good man. He deserves better than this. After he hung up, I sat in stunned silence. The tide was shifting. Even Marcus's own lawyer had seen through the deception. Whitman arranged for a forensic handwriting expert to examine both wills. Dr. Patricia Gaines had 30 years of experience and had testified in hundreds of cases. She worked in a small office downtown, surrounded by magnifying equipment and comparison charts. I watched as she examined Dad's signature on the forged will, then compared it to known authentic signatures from tax returns, business contracts, and the original will. She used various magnification levels, tracing tools, and comparative software. After 2 hours, she looked up and removed her glasses. This is one of the clearer cases I've seen in recent years. The signature on the October 15th will is a traced forgery. See here. She pointed to the screen showing an enlarged signature. The line weight is too uniform. When someone signs naturally, there's variation in pressure, slight inconsistencies in letter formation. This signature has none of that. It was traced from another document, probably using a light box or transfer method. How certain are you? In my professional opinion, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, this signature is not authentic. Your father did not sign this document. Someone else traced his signature from another source. She paused, studying me. Your brother didn't even try to hide it well. He must have been confident no one would check. I thought about Marcus's arrogance, his assumption that I'd just accept defeat. He thought I'd give up. That was his mistake, Dr. Gaines said simply. Whitman filed a subpoena for Marcus's bank records. It took 2 weeks for the documents to arrive, but what they revealed was damning. 3 days after the fraudulent will reading, Marcus had withdrawn $50,000 in cash from Dad's business account. 1 week later, another $30,000. Then luxury purchases, a new car, jewelry, a vacation package to the Bahamas. He's spending like the money's already his, Whitman said, spreading the bank statements across his desk. Every withdrawal, every purchase, it's all traceable back to accounts he fraudulently gained control over. This isn't just inheritance fraud, it's embezzlement. Can we stop him from spending more? We will. We're filing for an emergency injunction this week. But honestly, Ms. Harrison, the more he spends now, the worse it looks for him in court. He's establishing a pattern of knowing, deliberate theft. Judges don't look kindly on that. I studied the statements, seeing Marcus's greed laid out in black and white. Dad had always worried that Marcus cared more about money than family. Turns out he'd been right to worry. My phone buzzed. Text message from my cousin Bate. Heard you're contesting the will. Marcus says you're just being greedy. Thought you should know people are talking. So it was starting. Marcus was working to turn the family against me, painting me as the villain in his story. But I had something he didn't. The truth. Word spread through the family like wildfire. Cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone suddenly had an opinion about the will, the inheritance, and my decision to challenge Marcus. Family group chats that I wasn't part of apparently discussed little else. My Aunt Phyllis called, her voice tight with disapproval. Callie, your father made his wishes clear. Why are you making this difficult? Marcus is trying to honor his memory. Aunt Phyllis, Dad didn't sign that will. Marcus forged it. Oh, that's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? Yes, I have the original will, properly signed and notarized before Dad went into the coma. Silence, then. Well, I'm sure there's some explanation. Marcus wouldn't do something like that. But doubt had crept into her voice, seeds planted. Marcus, meanwhile, was working overtime to control the narrative. He posted on social media about how grief made people irrational, how some family members couldn't accept Dad's final wishes. Never mentioning me by name, but everyone knew who he meant. His friends commented with support. Stay strong, Marcus. Family can be so difficult. Your dad would be proud of how you're handling this. I stayed silent online. Didn't respond, didn't defend myself, didn't engage with his lies. Whitman had been clear. Let him talk. Every public statement was potential evidence. Every lie told now could be used against him later. People who tell the truth don't need to convince everyone, Dad used to say. Truth speaks for itself if you're patient enough to let it. The manila envelope appeared at my door on a Tuesday morning. No return address, no postage marks. Someone had hand-delivered it during the night. Inside were photocopies of emails, printed in small font, dozens of pages. I spread them across my kitchen table, reading with growing disbelief. The emails were between Marcus and Theodore Brennan, Dad's original attorney. Dated from September through October, they detailed Marcus's instructions for updating Dad's will. Make sure all assets transfer solely to me, one email read. My sister and I have discussed this. She doesn't want the responsibility of the business. That was a lie. We'd never discussed anything. Another email. Dad indicated before the coma that he wanted to simplify the inheritance. Everything to me, with a keepsake for Callie, just needs to be formalized. More lies. Dad had never said any such thing. The final email, dated October 14th, was the most damning. Attached is the signature file. Use this for the October 15th document. Make sure the notary understands the circumstances. Attached signature file. Marcus had sent Brennan a digital copy of Dad's signature to use on the forged will. The evidence was irrefutable. I called Whitman immediately. I just received copies of emails between Marcus and his first attorney. They prove premeditation. How did you get these? They were delivered anonymously. We can't use anonymous evidence. We need to authenticate the source. I think I know who sent them. I called Lydia, the nurse. She answered on the second ring. Did you send me something? I asked carefully. A long pause, then quietly. I couldn't live with myself knowing what he did. Your father was a good man. I waited until evening, when I knew Marcus would be alone at Dad's house. My house now, technically, according to the real will. I pulled into the driveway, gravel crunching under my tires. The porch light was on, casting shadows across the familiar front door. Marcus opened before I could knock, probably saw my headlights. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, that familiar smirk on his face. Come to beg for your share. Too late, Callie. Everything's already transferred. You forged Dad's signature, I said quietly. No accusation in my tone, just statement of fact. His smirk widened. You think anyone cares? Dad's gone. The will is legal. You're just a bitter sister who can't accept that he loved me more. He didn't love you more. He just trusted me more. That's why he gave me the original will, the real one, dated a month before his coma. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Marcus's face. You're bluffing. September 3rd, notarized by Wilson and Associates, witnessed by Dad's friends Tom Patterson and Harold Cross. Everything split evenly, with me designated as primary executor. Want to see it? The color drained from his face. You're lying. You forged his signature on October 15th, 2 weeks after he slipped into the coma. You traced it from another document. You also instructed Brennan to use a signature file you provided. I have the emails, Marcus. Every instruction you gave, every lie you told. You'll never prove it. I smiled then, really smiled for the first time in weeks. We'll see. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment, I thought he might actually hit me, but he just stood there, breathing hard, realizing for the first time that he might lose. You disgust me, I said, turning to leave. Dad would be ashamed of what you've become. The courthouse was old, built in the 1920s, with high ceilings and wooden benches that creaked. I sat beside Whitman, watching Marcus and his new attorney, a young man who looked fresh out of law school. Marcus was confident, grinning across the aisle at me like this was all a formality. Judge Helena Morrison entered, and we all stood. She was in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that suggested she'd seen every legal trick in the book. This is a matter regarding the estate of Vincent Harrison, she said, reviewing her notes. Ms. Callie Harrison is challenging the validity of the will submitted for probate. Proceed. Marcus's lawyer stood. Your Honor, this is simply a case of a grieving daughter unable to accept her father's final wishes. Vincent Harrison clearly stated his intentions in his will, properly signed and notarized. Ms. Harrison's challenge is based on emotion, not evidence. Whitman remained seated. Your Honor, we have substantial evidence that the will in question is a forgery, created while Mr. Harrison was in a coma and unable to sign any documents. Judge Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. That's a serious allegation, Mr. Whitman. Which we can prove, Your Honor. Marcus leaned over to whisper urgently to his lawyer, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. The judge noticed. Does the defense wish to respond? We maintain the validity of our document, Your Honor. Any claim of forgery is speculation. Whitman stood. We request the court examine both documents in question. The will currently in probate and an original will properly executed a month before Mr. Harrison's coma. Marcus's confidence cracked. Just slightly, but I saw it. The way his smile froze, the way his fingers gripped the armrest. He hadn't expected this. Whitman approached the bench, carrying the sealed envelope that had saved everything. Judge Morrison's expression remained neutral as she accepted it, but I saw her eyes sharpen with interest. She opened it carefully, removing the original will. Read through it slowly, examining the signature, the notary seal, the witness signatures. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of turning pages. Finally, she looked up. This document is dated September 3rd, 1 month before Mr. Harrison entered his coma. It names both Marcus and Callie Harrison as equal beneficiaries, with Callie designated as primary executor. The notarization appears legitimate. Marcus stood abruptly. That's not possible. Dad changed his mind. That's why he created the new will. While in a coma, Mr. Harrison, Judge Morrison's voice was ice. Please sit down. His lawyer pulled him back into his seat, whispering urgently. But the damage was done. Marcus's outburst had revealed his desperation. Mr. Whitman, do you have additional evidence regarding the document currently in probate? Yes, Your Honor. We have a forensic handwriting analysis showing the signature on the October 15th is a traced forgery. We also have testimony from Mr. Harrison's nurse confirming that Marcus Harrison brought documents to the hospital during his father's coma. And we have email correspondence showing premeditated fraud. Judge Morrison's expression hardened. I'm ordering an immediate investigation into the circumstances surrounding the October 15th document. All assets of the estate are frozen pending this investigation. Additionally, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for possible criminal charges. She turned to Marcus. Mr. Harrison, you are ordered to appear for a deposition within 1 week. The courtroom emptied slowly, whispers following Marcus as he stood on shaking legs. His lawyer immediately began explaining options, all of which sounded desperate. Request a postponement. Seek a plea arrangement. Prepare for potential charges. Marcus's face had gone from confident to pale in a matter of minutes. His carefully constructed world was collapsing, brick by brick, exactly as he'd built it. On lies, on fraud, on the belief that no one would question him. Outside the courthouse, reporters had somehow gotten wind of the case. Local news vans lined the street, cameras pointed at everyone leaving the building. Marcus tried to push past them, but they swarmed. Mr. Harrison, did you forge your father's will? Is it true you transferred assets while he was in a coma? How do you respond to fraud allegations? His lawyer pulled him away, shielding him from cameras. Marcus looked back once, catching my eye across the crowd. The smirk was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen on his face before. Fear. Whitman put a hand on my shoulder. His attorney just withdrew representation, officially due to ethical concerns, unofficially because he knows Marcus is guilty and doesn't want to be part of the train wreck. What happens now? The investigation takes a few weeks, but with the evidence we have, the handwriting analysis, the emails, the timeline, it's open and shut. Your brother committed fraud. Now he faces the consequences. That night, alone in my apartment, I finally let myself cry. Not from revenge or satisfaction, from release, from knowing that Dad's real wishes would be honored, from understanding that justice, though slow, was still possible. The story hit the news within 48 hours. Local businessman accused of will forgery. The headlines spread across social media, local papers, even made a brief mention on the evening news. Marcus's face appeared in every article, that professional photo he used for the company website. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Harrison and Sons Construction's business partners pulled out of contracts. Clients canceled projects. The phone at the main office rang constantly with people demanding refunds, threatening lawsuits, distancing themselves from the scandal. Marcus's personal accounts were frozen by court order. His new car, purchased with stolen funds, was seized. The Bahamas vacation canceled. Everything he'd bought with Dad's money, gone. His wife, Patricia, filed for separation 2 weeks after the court hearing. I heard through family gossip that she'd taken their 2 kids and moved in with her parents. The divorce papers were filed a week later. In the petition, she cited recent revelations about my husband's character as the reason for the split. Aunt Phyllis called, her voice subdued. Callie, I owe you an apology. We should have believed you. Other family members reached out similarly. Cousins who'd sided with Marcus now awkwardly tried to make amends. I accepted their apologies but kept my distance. The betrayal wasn't just Marcus's. It was theirs too, for assuming I was lying without evidence. Marcus, meanwhile, had gone silent. No social media posts, no public statements, just silence as his world crumbled around him. My phone rang at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, Marcus's number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. You ruined me. His voice was hollow, defeated. I sat up in bed, wide awake now. No, Marcus, you did that when you forged Dad's signature, when you lied to everyone, when you decided greed was more important than family. I needed that money. The company was struggling. I had debts, Callie. I was trying to save everything. By stealing from me, by dishonoring Dad's wishes. You don't understand business. You never did. Dad left you that necklace because that's all you deserved. A sentimental trinket for his sentimental daughter. The venom in his voice was startling. Even now, caught in his lies, he couldn't admit he was wrong. Dad trusted me with the real will for a reason, I said quietly. He knew you'd do exactly this. He prepared for it. I hate you. I know, you've hated me since we were kids. Hated that Dad valued integrity over ambition. Hated that I didn't worship you like everyone else did. But hate doesn't justify fraud, Marcus. I hung up as he started to respond. Let him scream at a dead line. I was done being his audience. The tears came then, but not from anger, from sadness. For the brother I'd thought I had. For the family that would never recover from this. For Dad, who'd loved us both but couldn't protect us from each other. The final hearing took place 6 weeks later. Criminal charges had been filed: forgery, fraud, embezzlement, and elder abuse. The district attorney's office had built an overwhelming case using everything we'd provided, plus additional evidence they'd uncovered during the investigation. I sat in the courtroom gallery, not on the witness stand this time, just watching. Whitman sat beside me, present for support rather than legal representation. This was the state's case now. Marcus stood before Judge Morrison again, looking 20 years older than he had at that first hearing. His cheap suit hung loosely on his frame. No expensive lawyer this time, just a public defender who looked exhausted. The prosecutor laid out the evidence methodically. The forged will, the traced signature, the emails showing premeditation, bank records proving embezzlement, testimony from Lydia, from Brennan, from Dr. Gaines, the handwriting expert, each piece building an unshakable foundation of guilt. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue diminished capacity due to grief, but it fell flat. The evidence showed calculation, not emotional distress. Judge Morrison listened to everything, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. Mr. Harrison, you have pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud and forgery. Given the premeditated nature of these crimes and the violation of trust involved, I'm sentencing you to 5 years probation, full restitution of all stolen funds, and 2,000 hours of community service. You will not serve prison time, but that's due solely to the request of your sister, who has asked for mercy despite your actions. Marcus looked at me then, shock clear on his face. I'd asked Whitman to submit a letter requesting leniency, not because Marcus deserved it, but because Dad wouldn't have wanted his son in prison. Because some part of me still remembered the brother who'd taught me to ride a bike, even if that person was long gone. Additionally, Judge Morrison continued, you are permanently barred from serving as executor or trustee of any estate. Your business license is suspended for 10 years, and you will have no claim to any portion of your father's estate. The September 3rd will is hereby validated as Vincent Harrison's true and final testament. The gavel fell. Marcus stood there, shoulders slumped. Everything he'd schemed for officially lost. His lawyer gathered papers quickly, eager to escape. As they left the courtroom, Marcus paused near my row. Thank you, he said quietly, for keeping me out of prison. I looked at him, this stranger wearing my brother's face. I didn't do it for you. I did it for Dad. He loved you despite everything. I'm honoring that even if you never could. He nodded once and walked away. I knew I'd probably never see him again. The family was fractured beyond repair, and Marcus would disappear into whatever life awaited him after disgrace. But I felt no satisfaction in his defeat, just exhaustion and a bone-deep sadness for what could have been. 3 weeks later, I stood in Dad's study for the first time as its legal owner. The house was mine now, officially transferred according to the real will. Marcus had been given 30 days to remove his personal belongings. He'd come while I was at work, taking his things and leaving without a word. The study was exactly as Dad had left it. his reading glasses on the desk, his favorite pen in the holder, the photo of all of us from my college graduation, back when we were still a family. I picked up the frame, studying our smiling faces. We'd looked so happy, so unaware of the betrayal that would eventually tear us apart. I spent the afternoon slowly going through Dad's things, not to catalog or inventory, but to remember, to honor the man he'd been. I found his old pocket watch, the one his father had given him, and wound it carefully. It ticked to life, steady and reliable, just like Dad had been. His desk needed cleaning, papers organized, dust removed. I worked methodically, treating each item with care. In the bottom drawer, I found a letter addressed to me in his handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. "Dear Callie, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you found the real will. I'm sorry you had to fight for what should have been yours freely. I knew Marcus's greed might lead him down a dark path. I hoped I was wrong, but I prepared for the worst. You were always the strong one, sweetheart. Not because you never broke, but because you always put yourself back together. Keep the house safe, like I asked. Fill it with love, not bitterness. And remember that I'm proud of you, always have been, always will be. Love, Dad." I sat at his desk and cried, clutching the letter to my chest. This was the closure I needed. Not the court victory or Marcus's downfall, but this. Dad's final words, his faith in me, his understanding that I'd have to fight, and his confidence that I'd win. "It's safe now, Dad," I whispered to the empty room. "I promise it's safe." 6 months later, I stood on the front porch at sunset, watching the sky turn gold and pink. The house had become home again, filled with my things now instead of memories of conflict. I'd converted Marcus's old room into a home office, repainted the living room, made the space mine while honoring Dad's memory. Harrison and Sons Construction had been restructured. I'd brought in a management team to run the day-to-day operations while I maintained oversight as owner. The company was rebuilding its reputation, slowly but surely. Dad's legacy would continue, just as he'd wanted. My phone buzzed, text from Cousin Bate. "Saw the article about the company's comeback. Dad would be proud. You did right by him." I smiled. The family was healing, slowly. Some relationships would never recover, but others had grown stronger. Adversity had a way of showing you who really mattered. Marcus had moved 3 states away, I'd heard, working construction for someone else's company, starting over at the bottom. We hadn't spoken since the sentencing. Maybe someday we'd find a way to reconcile, but I wasn't holding my breath. Some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the fight, the victory. It had cost so much, emotionally and financially. But standing here now, on this porch that Dad had built with his own hands, I knew it had been worth it. He'd taken everything that mattered to him, trying to steal what was mine. His marriage, his reputation, his freedom, his future, all sacrificed for greed. And what had he gained? Nothing but consequences. Meanwhile, I'd fought for truth and won. Not through anger or revenge, but through patience and preparation. Through trusting in the systems Dad had put in place to protect me. Through believing that justice, though slow, would eventually prevail. "Sometimes justice doesn't roar," I said quietly to the evening air, remembering Dad's voice saying those exact words years ago. "It whispers." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and deep blue. Inside the house, lights glowed warm and welcoming. This was home now. Not just a building, but a sanctuary. A place where Dad's memory lived on in every corner, every photograph, every carefully preserved piece of his life's work. I turned and walked inside, leaving the past on that porch, stepping into a future I'd fought hard to claim. The door closed softly behind me, and I finally, completely, let myself breathe. It was over, the fight was over, and I had kept my promise. The house was safe.